In the story of empire, violence is often imagined as soldiers, cannons, and flags planted in foreign soil. But sometimes, the deadliest weapon is not a rifle. It is a ledger, a contract, a ship manifest, a crop forced into the ground because somewhere far away, a corporation needs profit. This is the story of the East India Company, a British corporation that became more powerful than many nations. It had its own army, collected taxes, ruled millions, and helped build an empire on trade. But one trade, above all, would shape India, China, and Britain itself: opium. By the 19th century, opium was not just a drug. It was a system. It was planted in Indian soil, processed under colonial control, shipped across the ocean, smuggled into China, and converted into silver, influence, and imperial power. It created fortunes in Britain and misery across Asia. It fed addiction, destabilized governments, and helped trigger wars that forced China open at gunpoint. The human cost is difficult to count precisely. Some historians and critics connect the wider system of company rule, famine, forced extraction, and the opium economy to deaths in the millions. The phrase "killed 10 million people" is not a simple courtroom verdict. It is a charge against a machinery of profit that treated human life as an expense. To understand how a corporation could become so destructive, we begin not in an opium den, but in a boardroom. The East India Company was founded in 1600 when Queen Elizabeth I granted merchants a royal charter to trade in the East Indies. At first, it sought spices, textiles, tea, and luxury goods. But trade in the age of empire rarely stayed peaceful. The company built forts, negotiated with rulers, fought rivals, and transformed from merchant firm into political power. Its turning point came in India. After military victories in the 18th century, especially in Bengal, the company gained the right to collect revenue from vast territories. That meant taxes, land, courts, armies, and administration. A private company now governed millions. This was not normal business. This was corporate sovereignty. The company had shareholders in London, officials in India, soldiers on the ground, and one goal running through all of it: extract wealth. India became both a source of revenue and a laboratory for imperial economics. Farmers grew what the system demanded. Markets were reshaped. Industries were disrupted. When famine came, company policies often made suffering worse by prioritizing revenue over relief. But while the company extracted wealth from India, Britain had another problem: China. Europeans wanted Chinese goods, especially tea, silk, and porcelain. Tea became a British obsession. But China did not want much from Britain in return. The Qing Empire preferred silver, so silver flowed out of Britain and into China. For a commercial empire, that was unacceptable. The question became, what could Britain sell to China in huge quantities? The answer was opium. Opium had long been used as medicine, but in concentrated, smoked form, it became deeply addictive. The Qing government restricted the trade, but prohibition created opportunity. If opium could not be sold legally, it could be smuggled. If officials resisted, they could be bribed. If the trade caused collapse, merchants could call it demand. The East India Company did not usually sail into Chinese ports openly declaring itself a drug cartel. The system was more careful. In India, especially Bengal and Bihar, the company controlled opium production through a monopoly. Farmers were pushed or contracted into growing poppies. Raw opium was processed in company-supervised factories, then auctioned to private merchants who carried it to the China coast. This gave the company distance from smuggling while keeping profits close. It was a masterpiece of moral evasion. The company could say it was not directly selling illegal opium in China. It was merely producing and auctioning a commodity in India, but everyone understood the destination, the price, and the source of the money: addiction. In India, the system tightened colonial control over agriculture. Farmers who might have grown food or other crops were drawn into poppy cultivation under harsh conditions. Advances became debts. Contracts became traps. The soil, labor, and risk belonged to the peasant. The monopoly and profit belonged to the company. In China, consequences spread through society. Addiction affected laborers, merchants, soldiers, scholars, and officials. Silver flowed out to pay for the drug. Families lost income. Local administrations weakened under corruption. The Qing state saw not only a public health crisis, but a national security threat. Chinese officials tried to stop it, They issued bans, punished dealers, seized supplies, and debated responses. Some argued for legalization and taxation. Others saw opium as poison, deliberately pushed by foreign powers. One official, Lin Zexu, became the face of resistance. In 1839, he moved against the trade in Canton, arrested Chinese dealers, pressured foreign merchants, confiscated huge quantities of opium, and destroyed it. From the Chinese perspective, this was law enforcement. From the British imperial perspective, it was an attack on property. That difference tells us everything. Britain went to war not because China invaded Britain, and not because British civilians were under threat at home. Britain went to war because Chinese authorities interfered with a profitable trade. The First Opium War began in 1839. British warships, armed with superior naval technology, attacked Chinese forces and coastal cities. The war exposed the military gap between industrializing Britain and Qing China. Chinese resistance was real, but British firepower was devastating. In 1842, China was forced to sign the Treaty of Nanjing, opening ports to British trade, paying indemnities, and ceding Hong Kong to Britain. The message was clear. If China would not accept the terms of the drug trade, Britain would use violence to rewrite the rules. But the First War did not end the crisis. Opium continued. Foreign pressure grew. In the 1850s, the Second Opium War erupted. Britain, joined by France, fought China and forced deeper concessions. More ports opened. Foreign diplomats gained privileges. Missionaries entered wider territories. Eventually, opium was effectively legalized under pressure. This was not free trade in any honest sense. It was coerced trade backed by cannon fire. For Britain, the opium economy solved the financial problem. Silver from China helped pay for tea. Revenue from Indian opium strengthened colonial budgets. Merchants and investors made fortunes. A drug grown under imperial control in India became the key that unlocked Chinese wealth. For India, the story was darker. The same company that organized opium production presided over extraction, famine, and violence. Bengal had already suffered catastrophic famine in the 18th century. Later famines under British rule would show again how colonial priorities could turn drought and crop failure into mass death. It would be too simple to say opium alone killed every victim attributed to company rule. History is rarely that neat. People died through famine, war, repression, poverty, disease, and policies that drained resources from ruled societies. But opium was one of the clearest examples of the system's logic. Profit first, life second. The company did not need to hate the people it harmed. That is what makes the story so chilling. Its violence was bureaucratic. A farmer was a unit of production. A Chinese addict was demand. A famine victim was outside the revenue target. The machine did not always require emotional cruelty. It required indifference. And indifference, when armed with law, armies, and empire, can be catastrophic. By the mid-19th century, company rule was increasingly unstable. In 1857, a massive uprising broke out in India, involving soldiers, civilians, rulers, and communities with different grievances against company power. The rebellion was brutally suppressed. Afterward, the British Crown dissolved the company's direct rule. In 1858, the British government took control. The corporation that had conquered, taxed, traded, and governed was stripped of its empire. But its legacy did not vanish. The systems it built survived in colonial administration. The trade routes it shaped influenced global power. The damage of the Opium Wars haunted China for generations, becoming part of what many Chinese remember as a century of humiliation. Hong Kong remained under British control until 1997. The memory of foreign gunboats forcing open markets did not disappear. In Britain, the story was often cleaned up as commerce, expansion, and civilization. Beneath those polished words was a harder truth. A private company helped turn addiction into foreign policy. It used Indian land and labor to produce a banned drug for China. When China resisted, Britain fought wars to defend the profits. This is why the East India Company remains one of history's most disturbing examples of corporate power. It shows what can happen when a business gains the rights of a state without the moral responsibilities of one. It shows how shareholders can be far from suffering while still benefiting from it. It shows how empire can hide behind paperwork. The opium trade's rise was not an accident. It was engineered. Its rule was not natural. It was enforced. Its consequences were not limited to addicts in dark rooms. They reached farms in India, ports in China, banks in London, and battlefields across Asia. When we ask how a British corporation could be linked to millions of deaths, the answer is not one massacre,